It occurred to me this week as I was reading through the lessons that there is so much to be learned from some of the little moments that are related in the Scriptures. We tend to think of Bible stories as having such impact because of the big moments, the big miracle stories, the God-sized wonders, and the theophanies of burning bushes and parting seas and finding abundance where there was so little before, as in the feeding of the 5,000, which has been the gospel story for the last couple weeks. The people we encounter in the Bible impress us as being just giants, bigger than life, with rock-solid faith and confidence that keeps them connected to God in the face of such major, major obstacles. Take Elijah from our first lesson, for example. He is surely one of those giant personages. Who could question this man's faith? Who could possibly doubt his solid relationship with God? Huh? This is the man who could take on 850 prophets of the gods Baal and Asherah, along with the king and queen of Israel who had forsaken their Israelite faith to worship these false gods, and Elijah managed to beat them all by himself, with the power of God behind him, of course. Elijah proved in an enormous display of power and might that there was only one true God, and he brought it about by simply following God's lead and staying true to prayer in the face of the enemy. This is the man who saw to it that a poor woman was not without food in her poverty, making sure that her jar of meal and jar of oil were never empty. In 1 Kings 17, this is the man who brought a widow's son back to life that she might not be left alone in her widowhood and her old age, so that that boy would be able to help her, from 2 Kings 17. This is the man who would be taken up bodily into heaven in a chariot of fire. Most of you know that story, without having to suffer sickness and death as the rest of us do in 2 Kings 2. There could hardly be a more giant person of faith in the whole of the Bible, save for Moses and Jesus, right? But this giant faith is not what we see on display in today's first lesson from 1 Kings. No, this little story talks about Elijah, who has parked himself under a solitary broom tree and asked God to let him die. He is thoroughly depressed. This man of God, who has just finished that great display of faith against those 850 pagan prophets and seen the day triumph for God, this man of faith is thoroughly and utterly depressed. Suicidal, even. I am no better than my ancestors, he complains. I might as well be dead, he complains. What on earth could have brought him to this point? Well, I gotta say that killing off all those prophets of Baal and Asherah hadn't exactly endeared him to the king and the queen of Israel, who counted many of them as friends. Nor had proving before the whole kingdom of Israel that he was right and the king and the queen were wrong. And that didn't help his case much either. So rather than being hailed by everyone for his monumental faith and immediately converting all the backsliders, Elijah became a persona non grata in the whole kingdom. And even worse than that, the queen had sent out a note saying that anybody could kill him on sight, and quickly, please. So for all his faith in God and following God's lead, Elijah found himself in the unenviable position of being on the run for his life. He ran straight into the wilderness, which is a great place to hide, but not the most hospitable place in the world. There weren't a lot of food sources around in the wilderness, or water either, for that matter. And as the days went on, his hunger and his thirst surely added to his troubles. So I suppose it's not surprising that Elijah was depressed in that situation. Who wouldn't be? And yet we don't seem to immediately think of people like Elijah getting depressed or having the kind of troubles that we have. Why? Because we think that they are so rooted in faith, so connected to God, that there can't possibly be room for depression or doubts like you and I know. That's what we think. The fact is, everybody has troubles at one time or another. And those troubles have a way of bringing on doubts and depression for everybody. Do you remember what Jesus said when he was nailed to that cross? My God, why have you forsaken me? Why should Elijah be any different? I had a pastor friend who went through annual bouts of major depression every January and February up in Philadelphia. Even while surely being connected to God and teaching and preaching Sunday after Sunday about matters of faith. His depression was sometimes more than he thought he could take, he told me on more than one occasion. But somehow, he always got through until finally he made it into retirement at 62. The depression left him in those retirement years, and he lived to be 91, almost another 30 years. Not so very long ago, I remember finding myself going back and forth between setting up for a really big anniversary celebration at the church and making sure there was lots of joy at the church I was serving, and on the other hand, preparing for the funeral of a cousin who was just like a brother to me, both at the same time. It was not a happy juxtaposition of events. It was jarring and confusing and tiring in the extreme. But life is like that sometimes, isn't it? We don't always get to choose how our lives will play out. Having faith is no automatic guarantee against occasional depression or doubts, not even for the most religious among us. That surely is one of the major points of the Elijah lesson that we had for today. But there's more there to be told in that story. Elijah fell asleep under that solitary broom tree. And he probably needed that. Depression is just a real energy drainer. You all know that, I know. So sleeping is good. Sleeping is good. It helps you deal with your troubles a little better when you wake up. What's interesting in this story is that when Elijah awoke, he found something for his hunger and thirst. Totally unexpected. The narrative said it was left by an angel. Elijah didn't care. Elijah ate and drank. It gave him a little more strength, but he was still tired, so he laid right back down again and went to sleep. Later, Elijah is awakened a second time. This time, the text says, by the angel, who says to him, "Get up and eat, Elijah. Otherwise, the journey will be too much for you." So Elijah ate and drank. And thereafter, his depression subsided enough that he was able to continue on his journey through the wilderness 40 days and 40 nights, it says in the text. What's significant in this part of the story is the care that Elijah obviously got from God. Those who are connected to God stay connected to God, regardless of their troubles or their dire circumstances, regardless of their depressions and doubts. God will see to your care. God will be faithful. While that faithfulness may indeed be shown in miraculous or unexpected ways, it's far more likely that God will show that faithfulness in small but continuous and consistent ways. Through angels who come to us, known or unknown, with a kind word, a small loving deed, a little cake, a small jar of water, a card, a flower, a thought to brighten our day. Through angels, known or unknown, who encourage us out of our depressions and to keep on moving. Get up and eat. Otherwise, the journey will be too much for you. These angels and their kind deeds may not look all that extraordinary or God-sent when they first come to us. We may even greet them with as little gratitude as Elijah and just go lay down and go to sleep again. But God will keep on sending them around until we do indeed get up and take up the journey again. It's important to know at that point that the journey isn't just any journey. For people of faith, it is a walk with God. Elijah didn't just get up and walk aimless and depressed in the wilderness for the next 40 days and 40 nights. He walked straight to Mount Horeb, which was known by all to be the mountain of God. In other words, Elijah went directly to where he knew God to be. What drove him there? His faith drove him there. Maybe he's still a little depressed. Maybe he's still having doubts about his future. But faith, nonetheless, drove him to God, where he could find true comfort and direction and strength for his faith, as well as answers for his troubles. church is our mountain of God in our day. And when we come here, we receive that tiny morsel of bread and wine that may seem so very ordinary, given by familiar faces and familiar hands with familiar words that may seem less than extraordinary because of their familiarity. And yet, this sustenance given by Christ himself comes straight from heaven, as he said so in the gospel for the day. No less than did the food that was given to Elijah in the wilderness. And the words we hear mean the same thing. Get up and eat. Otherwise, the journey will be too much for you. Don't be surprised if you come to those wilderness times of doubt and depression. At the same time, don't be surprised that those angel visitations will come and help you along the way. Accept them with gratitude and know that they are indeed sent directly from God out of God's love for you. Then recognize that your journey is indeed a journey with God and to God. And those troubles will have answers in the same God of your faith.